So now you're familiar with the process of recording, let's take a more in-depth look at the transport. Starting from left to right, we first of all have the on-screen keys button, and this allows you to use your computer keyboard as a MIDI input device, which is great if you're writing on the go. You can also toggle this on and off with the shortcut F4. Below this is Groove, and this opens up the Regroove mixer, which is used to apply real-time MIDI grooves to your sequencer tracks, and is covered in full in the chapter Regroove. The quantized section determines whether MIDI is quantized during recording or not, and if so, to what resolution. Unquantized MIDI can be manually quantized by first selecting the clip and then pressing Quantize or Control or Command and K. Now, sync mode relates to how Reason synchronizes itself with external hardware or software. And for the purposes of this series, we don't really need to look at that, as it's mostly only relevant if you use external hardware. However, it is worth mentioning that Reason supports Ableton Link, which can be activated here. With Link enabled, Reason will automatically sync to any other programs or applications on the same network that also use Link. This includes iOS synths, or even a second laptop running Ableton Live, which is great for collaborative projects or jams. But for the most part, you're going to want to leave this set to internal. Next is the playhead position. Here you can directly enter an exact time in bars, beats, sixteenths, or ticks, or you can enter it in hours, minutes, seconds, and milliseconds. This is especially useful if you are working to a cue sheet, for example, and need to have certain sounds happen at exact times. Next, as discussed in the previous chapter, is the metronome and tempo area. Again, just to refresh, pre-count will give you a lead-in of 1 bar before recording, which can be turned on and off using Control or Command and P. The amount of pre-count can also be changed from options, number of pre-count bars. Now, as well as setting the tempo and time signature to static values, you can also automate them by alternate and clicking. And you'll see this has created automation lanes for time signature and tempo. You can find out more about automation lanes and clips in the chapter, Working with Automation. In the middle is the transport, which if you've used any other DAW before will be familiar to you. You can skip forward or backwards in time by 1 bar increments using fast forward and rewind, as well as the usual stop, start, and record commands, which all have their own shortcuts. Spacebar will toggle between stop and play, while Control or Command and Enter will activate recording. Alternatively, you can use the star key on your numpad if you have one. Dub and Alt are covered in the chapter Recording Alt Takes and Dubs, but in short, these allow you to create overdubs or different versions of a take using Reason's sequencer note lanes, so be sure to check out that chapter for a more detailed explanation. Cycle will enable or disable looping between the left and right locators, and can be toggled with L or / on your numpad. Next is the locators area where, like the playhead, locators can be set to exact bars, beats, sixteenths, and ticks. And again, remember you have that shortcut Control or Command and left click to set the left locator, and alternate and left click to set the right. You can also jump the playhead directly to the left or right locator by clicking L or R, or using the shortcut alternate and left arrow or alternate and right arrow. Now, this next area displays various information about Reason's performance, including DSP usage, disk overload warnings, and also the calculation wheel, which will show you the progress on things like time stretching or sample loading in large patches. Finally, we have delay comp. Now, latency and delay indoors is a deep subject, but the long and short of it is that every device creates some degree of latency in the signal. Some, especially complex effects, can create especially high latency, meaning that they might not play in time with the rest of your project. So a good example of this is here I have this kick and snare loop and also a hi-hat loop. And if you listen kind of closely, you'll hear that they're not quite in sync with each other. And that's because one track has an effect on it that introduces 4 milliseconds of latency. If I turn delay compensation on, you'll see that it's automatically detected the amount of offset that's needed to make these two tracks play together in time. Now, obviously the difference can be very subtle depending on the amount of latency that's introduced by an effect, but it can just help keep the mix together and also prevent things like phasing issues, which can be harmful to your overall mix. And very lastly of all, there's the Drop to Ali Hooper button, which will export your song to Reason's own music sharing platform. But that won't be covered in this series. So that's all of the functions of the transport explained. It's definitely well worth getting comfortable with the transport shortcuts and also exploring the Alt and Dub features in their dedicated chapter. So let's take another short break.